Wrestling should always tease. You don't want to go too far and trick fans, but if there is a way to inject some fair excitement into proceedings, do it. Keep that interest up. A lot of time, that's exactly all this is too. Companies just want your eyebrow to raise while we're actually heading in a totally different direction. It usually means if we want to return to at any point, we can. So what were some of these outliers that made us go, what the flub? I am Simon Miller, and here's the truly wild, almost ran WWE matches. Number 10, Umaga versus Jackass. October 2006, Monday Night Raw. Umaga did indeed destroy a lot of the Jackass crew. He didn't do this for fun either. WWE genuinely wanted to do this match and even had it penciled in for SummerSlam the next year. It eventually was a total mess because Steve-O and Chris Pontius found the whole thing so funny they laughed through the beatdown. You can guess how that was taken by other people. The rest of the locker room and management was super mad. It meant this all got dropped until it was the USA Network who asked for it to be brought back, which is when we hit reset. WWE could reintroduce the war at the Great American Bash before doing the handicap match. Shane McMahon was super involved too, so it had the backing, but ultimately I think the damage was already done. Neither side could meet in the middle, and the whole concept was thrown out the window. Umaga was the Intercontinental Champion come that summer and worked a three-way with Mr. Kennedy, and Carlito instead. I do not know what the Jackass crew were doing. Something unhinged, no doubt. Number 9, Steve Austin versus the Coach. Thank goodness we did not do this. Don't know what WWE was thinking with their use of Steve Austin after he retired, but this wasn't it. It was all part of Taboo Tuesday 2005, and yeah, to get the Rattlesnake on the card in a way he'd be safe, we decided he should face the Coach. Who exactly wanted that? According to the opponent himself, it never happened for one big reason: Austin never turned up. Yep. This was on the Coach's podcast, and he admitted he was disappointed, mostly because Stone Cold had indeed decided this was not a good idea. Don't forget, it would have been Austin's first official match since The Rock at WrestleMania 19. Look at it this way. Steve making choices like this made his big return at WrestleMania 38 even more special. He picks and chooses very well. Amazingly, Batista took this spot, and it was so weird. Jonathan came to the ring with Goldust and Vader. Don't overthink it. He just did. Me thinks Steve was right. Number 8, Mick Foley versus Vince McMahon. At WrestleMania 17 of all things, imagine adding this to what was already an all-time show. This was all good to go as well as Vince had signed off on it, but it was Mick who nixed it. He has spoken about this and admitted he was overthinking. It all came out during a chat with Inside the Ropes, and it was because Foley was a stickler for the details. Therefore, when he went through the story and found a bunch of plot holes, he worried the fans would turn on it. I suppose McMahon was happy to accept that, and eventually it pivoted to Shane versus Vince instead. It sounds like one element of this too was Foley begging for his job back, which he thought would make his character look desperate, and once again one of the audience turns on him. Mick was very good at seeing that stuff coming too, but either way, in retrospect, it feels like he thinks he should have done it. Number 7, the Wyatt family versus Justin Bieber. I tell you why I buy this one. Vince McMahon never knew exactly what to do with Bray Wyatt. I don't think he got it at all. It gets odder too, as it wasn't going to be Bray Wyatt, Eric Rowan, and Luke Harper just smashing Justin. Bieber would team with The Big Show and John Cena. Of course, why wouldn't he do that? Former WWE writer Kevin Eck has spoken about this, and yeah, the company were talking to Justin's team for a bunch of appearances on Raw before a big clash at SummerSlam. Apparently Bieber was going to win too. Can you imagine? The plan written down would have been Bray taking the pin as well, so see above. I'm sure he could have figured it out, but the WWE fanbase back then were ravenous over things like this. It was not going to help the Wyatts. I would guess it didn't come to pass because Bieber was such a huge star. Dotting the I's and crossing the T's is pretty tough, and sure, I get it. It's Justin Bieber. Just think you would have run the risk of really annoying some hardcore fans. When the night rolled around, Wyatt worked with Chris Jericho instead, and yep, Cena got destroyed by Brock Lesnar. Man, he was pushing for Justin. Number 6, Hulk Hogan versus Tugboat. Or Typhoon, depending how you know him. This was apparently on the cards. It would have been at WrestleMania 7, which is the night where Hulk Hogan took on Sergeant Slaughter, who was now an Iraqi sympathizer. That was a terrible storyline. Before Sarge was chosen, though, multiple people were up for the role, including the one and only Tugboat. This is because the real-life Fred Ogman was good friends with the Hulkster. That is usually how it happened. Bruce Pritchard revealed all of this on his podcast, and apparently we were even going to call him Chic Tugboat. so not even bothering to change his name, this would have been preposterous. The story would have been the same too, with the human water vessel turning his back on America, and do not forget, after Slaughter was moved into this position, Tugboat did go bad guy, became Typhoon, and started the heel tag team of the natural disasters with Earthquake. When you do look back, really it was Tuggers who got away with one here. WrestleMania 7's main event was not good. Number 5, Roman Reigns versus Adam Pearce. I don't know if this one was ever thought about for the 2021 Royal Rumble, but WWE definitely considered it for one show. Just watch the TV. It is important to remember that this was towards the end of the pandemic where there were no rules. So yeah, Adam Pearce is a former wrestler, dude used to be the NWA champion. One day we could still see him fight in a WWE ring. When we did get into January of that year then, Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman decided Pearce was a real issue because he kept sticking his nose into bloodline business. From nowhere, a graphic then appeared saying it would be Roman versus Pearce in a last man standing match at the pay-per-view, when of course the story took a turn and Kevin Owens took that spot instead. This was believable enough though, as while people were surprised nobody really called foul on it, the head of the table had been an asshole to Adam. He deserved some revenge. Obviously, we're miles past this now, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day we get Pearce versus Nick Aldis. When you throw everything into a pot, I think that could be pretty good. Narrative writes itself. Number 4, China versus Steve Austin. So this was also a planned match for SummerSlam. The hell is the deal with that event? It was all the way back in 1999, and guess who was pushing for this one? That's right, it was Vince Russo. Who else? This is why China did indeed win a 3-way on the 9th of August Raw, where she stood tall over Triple H and The Undertaker, and got a second victory over the game shortly after. She was now the number 1 contender. It then went nuts as Mick Foley beat China, which meant the main event would be Foley versus Triple H versus Austin. Listen, my friends, don't overthink it didn't make sense. Jim Ross opened up about this on his podcast, and basically, no matter what Russo wanted to do, Steve was never going to agree to it because it's not how he saw his character. Before this, the Rattlesnake had also turned down a love angle with Sable. He didn't want any of it. It sounds like Vince was probably pushing for it, and again, given the time, I don't think this would have been a good idea. While WWE rightfully did push China, I just worry about what we would have done. Let's not forget Vince Russo just did whatever popped into his head, which is why we got Judy Bagwell on a forklift. I do not think he was doing this for the right reasons. Number 3, The Demon versus Sister Abigail. This one was good to go. We even saw the angle play out on TV. The match graphic is out there for all to see, and during the build to TLC 2017, we even saw Bray Wyatt dressed up as Sister Abigail. He was wearing a veil over his face for some reason. I have no idea. I think life realized this wasn't going to help Wyatt, as Bray actually got sick before this, meaning WWE had to pivot. This is when we got Finn Balor versus AJ Styles instead. That was really good. Somebody must have had a word as well, because when Bray returned to television, this was never mentioned again. There's every chance this was his idea too, but it goes back to what we've already talked about. If Wyatt had been given more free reign, it likely would have made sense. Then Vince McMahon got involved. Just a really bizarre situation. Number 2, Triple H versus Mike Tyson. Another WrestleMania 17 pitch, and do not forget, the only reason Triple H worked The Undertaker on that show is because last minute Vince McMahon realized he didn't have a story for 2 of his biggest stars. I'll never get over that. That's crazy. This comes from the mouth of Hunter too, and sure, he could be saying it for effect, but look at the second WrestleMania. Mr. T had a boxing match with Roddy Piper. Why not do it again, I suppose? Everybody was on board as well, because we had seen back in '98 that Tyson did well within wrestling, when of course the obvious happened. I and Mike, who needed the cash, then asked for a crazy amount to do this. The WWE said, no way. The added part was the bout would have gone 6 rounds at 3 minutes each, and I hope the company was planning to work this. You ever tried proper boxing? After 45 seconds you will want to die. It's super hard. I'm also not sure WrestleMania 17 needed it either, all things considered. What an absolutely mad fight this would have been. Number 1, the King of the Deathmatch. WrestleMania 14 could have been vastly different if Mick Foley and Terry Funk had their way. It came during the wild feud between Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, which included a super violent exchange at that year's Royal Rumble. They really did just smack each other right in the face. We also got crazy chair shots, and given that Terry Funk was involved here, he had a chainsaw. This wasn't just for ha-ha though. The pair eventually went to the powers that be and said they wanted to do a King of the Deathmatch war at WrestleMania. Their source was the matches they had already done in Japan, following the same rules. Foley wanted to go all in here. Do a best of 7 series with the decider being the hardcore battle. Instantly, Vince McMahon said no. He thought it would be too gruesome. Mick talked about this on his podcast and even wanted to take it to locations outside of the building, with the most violent part coming in front of the crowd. Surprise, surprise, it was still a negative. If only AEW had been around. I actually think, all things considered, it was probably best we did not do this. Can you imagine how bloody it would have been? I'm not sure any of us would have actually recovered. Know of any other wild matches that WWE almost put on? Make sure you let us know in the comments below before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. You can also click the video on the screen to get even more WWE facts, but otherwise, my friends, you take care of yourself, and I will talk to you all again very soon.